Please comment where you are watching in the world. I was 21 and stupidly eager to impress. The kind of eager that makes you second-guess your shoes and your laugh, and whether your fringe is doing that odd kink again. It was my first date with Ben, a shy lad I'd met at a friend's party. Nice smile, worked at a record shop downtown. The sort of boy who said please and actually meant it. Miami in 1983 was humming, humid, noisy neon, and I'd convinced myself that if I could just make it through a plate of something Cuban without spilling on my dress, we'd be fine. He pulled up in a battered Chevy that coughed at every light. I slid in, tried to keep my knees from sticking to the seat, and immediately pretended I liked the new wave track on the radio. Ben grinned. "Good tune," he said. "Yeah," I lied, fiddling with my bracelet as Little Havana unfurled in signs in Spanish, and the smell of coffee sharp enough to wake the dead. The restaurant was the sort with colorful tiles and old family photos crowding the walls. It was packed, kids squealing, aunties arguing over who'd pay, waiters skidding past with plates of roast pork and plantains. We got a two-seater by the window. Outside, the streetlights smeared orange across the bonnet of every passing car. My shoulders finally unclenched. Maybe I thought, maybe this won't be a disaster. Ben told me about a rare pressing he'd found at work. I nodded as if I knew what a rare pressing was, and sipped my soda to hide the fact I didn't. From the kitchen, something cracked, ice dropping in a machine, that sharp pop a split second after a clunk. I flinched, then laughed at myself. He didn't notice. He was tracing the label's misprint with his fingertip in the air, a collector's reverence. That pop came again a few minutes later. Not the ice this time. Somewhere outside, a motorbike idled too long. One of the waiters, thin as a rake, slid a bolt across a side door with the weary competence of someone who'd done it before. He caught my eye and gave the smallest shrug. "Busy night," he said, and moved on. Our food landed, mountains of pork, rice shining with oil, a cup of coffee so dark it looked like varnish. I was just telling a story about my mum and her obsession with Tupperware when the world split. A pop. A sharper pop pop pop. The window by my left shoulder shattered. It didn't break then fall. It burst, a sheet of crackling sound as hundreds of pieces turned into a breath of glittering knives. Something yanked me down. My own body or Ben's hand, I didn't know, and we were under the table, the sticky floor cold through my knees. More pops, too many, not like films, messy and stuttering and too loud to think. People screamed in Spanish and English, plates smashed, cutlery skittered like insects. Glass was everywhere. It dug into my palms, tiny stings I didn't feel until later. I tucked my head and could only stare at the hem of my dress, a stupid little tear opening like a mouth. I remember the smell, burnt meat, spilled coffee, the metallic tang you taste at the back of your throat when you've bitten your lip. I remember the ice machine cracking again, horribly similar, and my mind trying to make the sounds match, to turn gunfire into a kitchen noise. Ben's fingers found mine. His skin felt clammy. He didn't squeeze, he just held on like a lifeline he was afraid to tug. It stopped. The way storms sometimes stop, all at once. Silence rushed in, and stood in the doorway like a stranger deciding whether to enter. Then came the sobbing, the rapid, high questions. "Donde esta? Are you okay?" The scrape of chairs righted by shaking hands. I stayed under the table, because moving felt like stepping off a ledge. Someone shouted that it was over. A waiter's voice, I think, the same thin man who'd slid the bolt. "Calma, calma," he said, coaxing as if to children. I peered out. The restaurant looked like a party the morning after the worst night. Tables on their sides, rice like confetti, coffee bleeding across tiles and brown comets. A family photo near the till, that cheerful black and white of a couple cutting cake, had a neat hole through the corner. I stared at that hole far too long. We got up. My legs shook so much I had to clutch the back of a chair. No one seemed gone. Cut hands, a woman pressing a napkin to her arm, a boy with a scratched cheek, but nothing worse in my line of sight. Relief hit, and then guilt for feeling it. Police sirens wound closer, and the idling motorbike was gone. An officer asked what I'd seen. I opened my mouth and nothing arrived but fog. "Noise," I said finally. "Glass." Ben told them we'd ducked straight away. Someone else said it was politics. Cuban dissident, angry at a particular owner or a particular sign out front. A point to be made, not bodies to be counted. As if that helped. They let us go. Outside, the air was thicker, the lights harsh. Miami looked the same but felt like an impersonator, a city wearing its own skin a bit too loosely. Ben drove in silence. With the radio off you could hear the fan belt whine, and the tinny rattle of a coin in the ashtray. When we reached my building, I didn't get out at once. I sat, hands in my lap, and waited for my breath to belong to me again. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and we both heard how it wasn't true. That night I didn't sleep. Every noise outside was a pop. Every car backfiring was a window shattering anew. I sat on the carpet and inspected my palms with a magnifying glass until I'd teased out 3 glittering flecks. The 4th stayed, a bright star under the skin, tender when pressed. We went out again a week later, because that's what you do when you pretend you can carry on. We were kind to each other, extra careful around sentences, as if words might explode too. Whatever spark weed had felt damp, like a match struck in drizzle, a brief flare, then smoke. No one's fault. Just the knowledge of how fast the ground can tilt. The restaurant closed, boarded over for months. When it reopened, someone had replaced the shot photo with another, nearly identical. The couple's smiles were the same, but the cake was different, more icing, less fruit, and I couldn't say why that unsettled me more than the whole ever had. I walked past without going in. For a while I avoided crowds. Supermarkets were worst. A jar slipped from a shelf and smashed near my foot once, and I cried in the pasta aisle, hands to my ears like a child. It got better, as these things do, by erosion rather than miracle. But even years later, when a motorbike idled too long below my flat, the old fear uncurled. I'd go to the window and part the curtain. The street would be empty, humming with heat and distant music, and I'd stand there anyway, searching the neon for a face I'd never seen. What I learnt that night wasn't heroic or neat. It was that you can be thinking about your hair and the right joke and whether a boy will like you, and then in an instant your world becomes the underside of a table, your cheek against sticky tile, your prayer very small and very clear. And when the glass is swept and the window mended, a shard still travels with you, bright beneath the skin, catching the light whenever it wants. I'd been looking forward to that Friday night all week. Stephen, the quiet, thoughtful bloke I'd just started seeing, had planned dinner and maybe a bit of dancing afterwards. He wasn't flashy, but he had that calm way about him, like he was genuinely listening rather than waiting for his turn to speak. It felt refreshing. We ate at a cozy Italian place, dim lights, bowls of pasta, conversation flowing so easily it felt like we'd known each other longer than a few weeks. When Stephen suggested heading to a club nearby, I was all in. I loved dancing, and the idea of cutting loose with him sounded perfect. The club was packed, bass thudding, lights strobing, bodies moving like one giant tide. We danced for hours, laughing, sipping overpriced cocktails, the whole night buzzing like it couldn't go wrong. Then he appeared. A man, older than the crowd, slick back hair, perfect smile, sharp shirt. He introduced himself as Dan, though everyone called him Hot Tub Dan. I thought it was some silly nickname, quirky and harmless. He was charming, quick with his jokes, easy in a way that drew people in. He told us he was hosting an after-party. Massive place, drinks flowing, hot tub out back, he promised, and others overhearing got excited. Before I knew it, 6 or 7 of us were piling into Ubers headed for his house. When we arrived, my jaw dropped. The place was enormous. Modern, sleek, like something from a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, manicured lawn, and out the back, sure enough, a hot tub steaming in the night air. Inside, the party atmosphere picked up instantly. Music blasted, drinks were poured, people laughed and jumped straight into the tub. Dan was the perfect host, always topping up glasses, always hovering near the girls with a smile. I felt exhilarated. I didn't want the night to end. Stephen, though, he seemed tense. He stuck close to me, barely drinking, eyes flicking around as if he were watching something the rest of us couldn't see. I teased him for being a killjoy, but he just smiled thinly and said nothing. Around 2 a.m., I was still buzzing, laughing with a couple of girls in the kitchen when Stephen leaned in. "We should go," he said firmly. "Already? The night's just getting good." I protested, a bit tipsy, grinning. He shook his head. "I'm tired. Let's call it a night." Something in his tone silenced my arguments. Reluctantly, I agreed. We grabbed a taxi and left. I remember sulking slightly in the back seat, annoyed at missing out. Stephen stared out the window, jaw tight. The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. It was the police. My stomach lurched as they asked if I'd been at a party the night before. When I said yes, they asked me to come to the station. Sitting in that interview room, I felt my hangover vanish. The officers explained. A girl had been assaulted at the party after we'd left. By Dan. They were building a case against him. My blood ran cold. I thought about his grin, his hand always pressing a drink into mine, the way he hovered. I realized how stupidly easily, it could have been me. They asked what I'd noticed. I said he'd seemed charming, generous, maybe too attentive. I mentioned the drinks, how he never let anyone pour their own. The officers exchanged a look. One said they'd already found disturbing evidence at his house, videos, pictures, recordings. He'd been doing it for years. I walked out of that station shaking. The world felt warped. Hours before, I'd been laughing in his kitchen, thinking it was harmless fun. Now I knew it had been a trap. I texted Steven as soon as I got home, asking him to come over. When he arrived, I told him everything. His face was pale, grim. When I asked why he'd been so insistent on leaving, he admitted he'd had a bad feeling from the start. Said Dan was always pushing drinks too hard, always circling the younger girls like a shark. He didn't want to frighten me, so he just said he was tired. I stared at him, tears prickling. He'd saved me, though he'd never put it in those words. I hugged him, whispering thanks over and over. Over the next weeks, the news came out. His real name wasn't even Dan, it was Chris. Hot Tub Dan was a nickname that stuck, but it covered something far darker. The evidence on his computer was overwhelming. Dozens of recordings. Victims who hadn't even known. He was convicted months later, sentenced to 10 years. It felt like justice, but it didn't erase the sickness I felt. I couldn't stop picturing how close I'd come. One more drink, one more hour, and I might have been another nameless girl on one of those files. Now, when I think back to that night, it's Steven I remember most. His quiet instinct, his insistence on leaving when I was too blind to see. I don't know what might have happened if I'd stayed, but I know this. Sometimes the difference between safety and horror is just one person's gut feeling, and whether you listen. By the time I met Daniel, I was tired. Tired of bad choices, tired of men who thought fights were flirting, tired of the bruises that lingered longer than affection ever did. I'd promised myself something better. No more drug dealers or lads who thought cage fighting was a personality. So when Daniel popped up on the app, I felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't flashy. No shirtless gym selfies, no cocky smirks. Just a normal bloke, brown hair, kind eyes, steady job, liked hiking. We chatted for weeks, easy back and forth, jokes that actually landed. I told him a bit about my past, enough to make him understand why I was wary. He didn't judge. He listened. It felt like a clean slate. When he suggested meeting at a quiet pub on the edge of the city, I agreed. It wasn't fancy, but I liked that. Somewhere ordinary, somewhere I could breathe. I arrived first and took a table at the back. The place smelled of old wood and ale, the low murmur of conversations filling the gaps between songs on the jukebox. When Daniel walked in, right on time, relief swept through me. He looked exactly like his photos, average height, neat hair, that gentle smile. The date started well. We talked about films, about the sort of music our parents forced on us as kids, about the best places for fish and chips in town. I felt lighter than I had in months. Halfway through, he excused himself for the loo. I sipped my drink, thinking about how easy it had been so far. But when he came back, something was off. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He seemed distracted, like his mind was snagged on something he wasn't saying. I let it slide. We finished our drinks, and when he offered me a lift home, I said yes. I didn't want the night to end yet. We walked to his car, parked in the dim lot behind the pub. That's when I saw them. A group of lads lingered at the far end. Skinny, twitchy, restless energy rolling off them. I knew that look. The hollow cheeks, darting eyes, the smell of stale smoke. My chest tightened, and then I recognized one of them. Johnny. He used to hang around with an ex of mine. A dealer, violent, the kind of man you never really escaped. I grabbed Daniel's arm, whispering that we should hurry. He nodded, quickening his step. But Johnny's eyes had already found mine. Recognition flickered across his face, and he smirked. The group moved towards us. They fanned out, blocking the path to Daniel's car. One of them, a tall bloke with a shaved head, called out, "Who's this then? Who's the new boyfriend?" His tone was mocking, sharp. Daniel tried to stay calm. "We're just leaving, lads." They laughed. One circled behind, another tapped something heavy against his palm, a crowbar. My stomach dropped. Daniel's hand found mine. "Come on," he muttered, pulling me towards the car. But the group tightened around us like a noose. The tall one swung the crowbar at the car, smashing the side mirror clean off. The crack of glass echoed across the empty lot. Another booted the door, leaving a dent. I screamed. Daniel shouted for them to back off, but his voice was swallowed by their laughter. We scrambled into the car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the seatbelt. They were pounding on the windows now, shouting, spitting threats. One pressed his face to the glass, grinning wide enough to show broken teeth. Daniel didn't hesitate. He turned the key, slammed the car into gear, and floored it. The tires screeched, smoke curling as we shot forward. For a terrifying second I thought they'd cling on, pull the doors open, drag us out. But then they dropped back, their shouts fading as we sped out of the lot. I twisted in my seat, heart hammering, watching them shrink in the rear window. Johnny stood in the middle, hands cupped to his mouth, yelling something I couldn't hear. He raised a hand, pointed at me, then dragged his finger slowly across his throat. The rest of the ride was silent. Daniel's knuckles were white on the wheel. I kept whispering, I'm sorry, like a broken record. Because it was my past that had followed me there. Those men weren't after him, they were after me. When we reached my flat, I turned to him, cheeks hot with shame. I didn't know they'd be there, I said. I swear, I thought I'd left all that behind. He nodded, kind enough to say, it's not your fault. But his voice was tight. His car was damaged, his night ruined, his sense of safety shattered, all because of me. Before I got out, he surprised me. I'd like to see you again, he said. His eyes flickered, unsure, but the words were there. I clung to them like hope. I smiled and said yes. For 2 days, I replayed the night, trying to imagine a better second date. But when I texted, there was no reply. A couple of days later, I tried again. Nothing. Then I saw he'd unmatched me on the app. My heart sank. I couldn't blame him. Who would want to step back into danger, to risk another night like that? But it hurt. Because for once, I'd thought I'd found someone decent. Someone who might give me a fresh start. And instead, the ghosts of my past had smashed their way back in, crowbars and all, reminding me that I couldn't escape that world as easily as I'd hoped. For weeks, I kept glancing over my shoulder, listening for footsteps in empty car parks, half expecting Johnny to emerge from the dark. The memory of that crowbar scraping the car window haunted me. In the end, Daniel vanished as quickly as he appeared, and I was left alone again. Alone, and more certain than ever that some pasts don't stay buried. They wait, twitching in the shadows, ready to smash the glass the moment you think you're safe. I'd been single for a while, scrolling through apps, half bored, half hopeful, when I came across Callum's profile. His photos looked like they'd been taken outside nightclubs, his arm always draped around someone, and the captions were all about cars, trainers, and the hustle. A bit cocky, I thought, but there was a grin in every picture, and sometimes that sort of bravado is just a cover for nerves. Against my better judgment, I swiped right. He messaged straight away. Not hi or how's your day, but when we going out then? The kind of line that would normally put me off, but that night it made me laugh. So when he suggested a drive and grabbing food somewhere low-key, I said yes. I pictured a greasy spoon or a takeaway, nothing fancy, but still, the idea of blasting music in a car with the windows down felt like a proper date in its own way. When Callum pulled up outside my flat, I knew before I even got in that I was in for something else entirely. His car shook with the bass before I'd even opened the door, the windows tinted darker than a funeral limo. The alloys gleamed under the streetlight, and the exhaust spat a little as he revved. He leaned out the window, big grin, gold chain flashing. "All right, love," he said, and I climbed in. The smell hit me straight away, air freshener sharp enough to sting my nose, layered over leather polish. The seats were stiff, the kind of fake leather that clings to your skin. Callum wore a designer tracksuit, spotless white trainers, and rings that clinked on the steering wheel. He gave me a quick up and down look, then nodded approvingly, as if I'd passed some test. The drive through town started off all right. Music blared, lights strobed past, and Callum chattered on about his car, how he'd modded it, the street races he'd won, the jealous looks he got whenever he pulled up at lights. I couldn't tell how much of it was true, but I smiled and nodded, caught somewhere between amused and uneasy. Then he asked, "Want to see what she can do?" I thought he meant a quick rev or a short burst of speed. I shrugged, playing it cool. "Go on then." That was my mistake. He swerved onto a quieter road, and his whole posture shifted. His grin widened, his hands tightened on the wheel, and suddenly we were flying. The speedometer climbed, and my stomach flipped like I'd missed a step on a staircase. The engine roared, vibrating through my chest. My fingers dug into the seat, but I kept my mouth shut. I didn't want to seem boring or scared, though fear was building in my throat like bile. Streetlights smeared into lines. He cut corners, threaded through gaps too small, tires squealing, and I thought, any second now we'll crash. My heart hammered, sweat slick on my palms. Then came the sirens. At first, I thought ambulance, maybe fire. But Callum's grin faltered. He checked the rear view, swore, and the car lurched faster. I twisted round and saw them. Blue lights, at least 2 police cars, maybe 3. "What's happening?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He just slammed the accelerator, and we were pressed back into our seats as if the car had turned into a rocket. The sirens grew louder, closer. Flashing lights painted the mirrors, dazzling, disorienting. I wanted to scream, but my voice stuck. My chest hurt from holding my breath. The city blurred past. The roads became a tunnel of streaks and noise. A bang. A jolt. My head smacked the window. Pain bloomed, hot and dizzy. One of the police cars had clipped us, sending us skidding. Callum swore again, fought the wheel, but the car spun, tires screeching, until we slammed to a stop sideways across the tarmac. Before I could breathe, glass exploded beside me. Shards rained down, glittering in the strobing lights. I screamed, covering my face, tiny cuts burning across my arms. Another crash, the driver's side gone too, and then I saw them. Officers, dozens it seemed, surrounding us, weapons pointed in through the broken windows. Real guns. Not tasers. Guns aimed straight at me. Hands up. Hands where we can see them. I froze. My brain screamed I'm not a threat, but my body locked. Finally, I forced my arms up, shaking. Out! Out now! The door was wrenched open, rough hands grabbing me, pulling me into the freezing night air. My shoe slipped off in the scramble, and the road's grit bit into my bare foot. I couldn't look at the officers' faces. I stared at the ground, at the oil-slick rainbows in the tarmac, my hands trembling above my head. Callum was dragged out next, shoved to the ground, shouting protests that no one listened to. I stood shivering while another officer checked my bag, patted me down. Questions came fast. Who was I? What was I doing there? Did I know why Callum ran? My voice cracked, but I told them it was a first date, that I had no idea. I saw disbelief in their eyes. They thought I was lying. Then came the humiliation, traffic slowing, drivers craning necks, strangers staring at me barefoot on the roadside with guns still trained. My cheeks burned. My heart wouldn't calm. Eventually, they decided I wasn't involved. They let me go. Not kindly, but at least I wasn't cuffed like Callum. He was shoved into a van, still cursing. They said the car had been flagged, stolen maybe, or tied to something worse. They didn't explain. I didn't ask. An officer drove me home. The ride was silent except for the hum of tires. Through the window, the city looked warped, hostile. When we pulled up at my flat, I went inside, locked the door, and slid down against it, shaking so hard my teeth clattered. My phone buzzed with messages from friends asking how the date was going. I couldn't reply. What could I say? That I'd nearly been shot dead because I didn't want to seem boring? He was exactly the sort of man people warned me about, though at first glance he seemed like a dream. Marcus. A handsome Greek guy, wealthy, sharp suit, the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room but took possession of it. We'd been introduced by a friend who swore he was a great catch. When he asked me out for lunch, I said yes. I wanted to believe maybe I was stepping into something new, something better than the usual half-hearted dates I'd been on. The restaurant he picked was the kind with white tablecloths, silver cutlery polished to a shine, and waiters who hovered just out of earshot. I'd never eaten anywhere so formal. I wore my nicest dress, suddenly aware of every crease and loose thread. Marcus arrived late, of course, but breezed in like the world bent around his schedule. Tailored suit, expensive watch that caught the light, and that confident smile that made me feel as though I was already being judged. We sat, and without even looking at the menu, he ordered for both of us. I thought it was a little presumptuous, but I stayed quiet. He ordered wine too, and when the waiter brought the wrong bottle, Marcus snapped. Not a raised voice, not an embarrassed laugh. No, he cut the poor man down with words that were like knives. Incompetent, he sneered, shaking his head like the waiter wasn't even worth looking at. Something in my stomach shifted. It wasn't irritation, it was dread. That cold, sinking feeling when you realize you might not know the person sitting across from you. I tried to redirect, asking about his hobbies, his family. He answered in clipped sentences, eyes darting to his watch, like I was a meeting that had already run over time. I laughed at something, desperate to fill the silence, but it fell flat. By the time the bill arrived, I knew there'd be no second date. He tossed his card onto the tray without glancing at the total. I offered to split, more out of politeness than anything, but he dismissed it with a flick of his hand. "It's nothing," he said, his tone not generous but dismissive. The sensible thing would have been to leave it there. Thank him politely, call myself a cab, and never answer his calls again. But my car was in the shop, and when he offered me a lift home, I hesitated. A taxi would cost more than I had on me. It was broad daylight, I told myself. A quick drive, nothing more. When I gave him my address, he smiled faintly, and I told myself I'd imagine the glint in his eyes. We set off. At first, it seemed normal, but after 10 minutes, I noticed the streets weren't familiar. The buildings thinned, roads stretched wider, and soon we were winding between fields, hedgerows, and the occasional sagging barn. "Where are we going?" I asked, trying to sound calm. "Scenic route," he said, the words dripping with amusement, like I'd asked a foolish question. Something in his voice made my skin crawl. I glanced at my bag on the floor. This was before everyone carried a mobile. No way to call for help. The car seemed louder now, the tires chewing the tarmac, the engine humming steadily as if it knew exactly where it was headed. My pulse beat in my ears. "I'd prefer to go straight home," I said more firmly. That was when Marcus's mask slipped. He didn't shout. His voice was low, calm, but each word landed like a stone in my stomach. He said I'd wasted his time, that I'd used him for a free lunch, that I'd smiled, flirted, made him believe I was interested when really I wasn't. "I don't like being played," he said. I tried to explain, clumsy, desperate words about not wanting to mislead him, that it was just lunch, nothing more. He didn't care. Then he said it. He could drive deeper into the countryside, he told me. No one would hear. No one would find me for days, maybe weeks. He could do anything he wanted. And he said it the way some people remark on the weather, casually, like it was just fact. The air inside the car seemed to thicken. My hands shook in my lap. I thought about my mom, about how she didn't know where I was, about how stupid I'd been to climb into this man's car. I thought of headlines. I begged him to take me home. My voice cracked, the words tumbling over themselves. I said I was sorry, that I hadn't meant to waste his time, that he was right. Anything to soften his mood. For a long time, he didn't respond. His hands were white on the steering wheel, knuckles rigid. The countryside rolled on. Empty lanes, skeletal trees, birds lifting in sudden flocks from fields as though startled by some sound I couldn't hear. Finally, he turned the car around. No explanation, no expression. Just a tight silence as the lanes gave way to houses, then streets, then the comfort of streetlights. When we reached my neighborhood, I reached for the door handle, desperate to escape. But his hand shot out, iron fingers clamping around my wrist. He turned to me, eyes hard as flint. "I could have done anything to you out there," he said softly. "Remember that." He let go, and I stumbled out, barely managing to slam the door behind me. My legs carried me inside on autopilot. I locked the door, pressed my back against it, and slid down to the floor, gasping as if I'd just outrun something. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything. How he'd driven me into the middle of nowhere, what he'd said, how afraid I'd been. They listened, but there was no evidence. My word against his. A wealthy, polished man who knew how to smile for the right people. He told them a different story, of course. Said he'd just driven me home, taken a longer route for a nice chat. Said I was overreacting, dramatic, embarrassed that the date hadn't gone well. They let him go. A warning, nothing more. For weeks afterwards, I checked my locks 3-4 times before bed. Every pair of headlights, slowing outside, sent me diving for the curtains. His words echoed at the back of my mind like a mantra. "I could have done anything to you out there." And he was right. He could have. That knowledge changed something in me. A scar not visible, but felt every time I slid into a stranger's car, every time someone insisted on taking charge. I learned to trust the cold, twisting feeling in my stomach, to listen when something was off. It wasn't just a bad date. It was a reminder of how fragile safety really is, how quickly charm can curdle into menace, and how easily a single decision can put your life in someone else's hands. I should have known the night was doomed the moment Jason grabbed the menu from my hands like a waiter in a hurry. We were sitting in this crowded, dimly lit Italian place in Manhattan, the kind with red vinyl booths and framed black and white photos of Frank Sinatra on the walls. The air smelled like garlic knots and cheap Chianti, and the waiters all had that New York brusqueness, moving between tables like they were part of a ballet. Jason had insisted we go here because it was authentic. I wasn't even allowed to suggest anywhere else. Before I could open my mouth, he flagged the waiter down with a snap of his fingers, an actual snap, and announced, "She'll have the chicken parm. I'll do the veal marsala. And bring a bottle of the house red. Women love when a man takes charge." The waiter raised his eyebrows, glanced at me for confirmation. I gave the world's smallest shrug, because what was I supposed to do, start a fight in front of the bread basket? Jason leaned back in the booth, grinning like he'd just rescued me from the burden of decision-making. "See? That's confidence. Women need that. Men today are too soft." At first, I thought maybe it was a joke. A bad one, sure, but something he'd walk back with a laugh. But Jason doubled down. Every sentence out of his mouth was a lecture. He poured the wine for both of us, filled his glass to the brim and mine halfway, and held it out like a toast. To women finally realizing men know best. I almost spit out my sip. The food arrived quickly, big steaming plates that made the whole table smell like heaven. But Jason didn't eat. He launched straight into a monologue. He told me feminism was a scam. Not just a scam, a revenge plot cooked up in the 60s. He said women only pushed for equality because deep down they wanted to punish men for being born stronger. He used words like agenda and conspiracy, waving his fork around like a sword. It would have been funny if he wasn't so deadly serious. I tried to change the subject, asked about his job, his family, even what movies he liked. He shut each question down with the same dismissive wave. "That's small talk. I'm about truth. Let me put you on to something." The people in the booth next to us kept glancing over. The waiter dropped off extra napkins and gave me this pitying little smile, like he'd seen this date archetype 100 times before. By the time dessert rolled around, Jason was sweating, actual beads of sweat running down his temple, from the effort of mansplaining the downfall of modern society. He wiped his forehead with a napkin, leaned in close, and whispered like he was telling me state secrets. "The government doesn't want strong families anymore. That's why they push therapy, antidepressants, all that crap. They want men weak, women angry. Divide and conquer." Then he said the words that made my stomach sink. "When we're together, I'll show you what real order looks like." That was it. I was done. I reached for my purse, muttered something about an early morning meeting. He frowned, confused, like he genuinely didn't understand why I wouldn't want to spend all night listening to his manifesto. He offered to walk me to the subway. I told him no, firmly, and slipped out before he could argue. As I stepped into the cool Manhattan air, neon signs buzzing above me, I realized I hadn't laughed once all night. Not because it wasn't funny, but because it was too real. Jason didn't think he was on a bad date. He thought he was preaching to the unconverted. The last thing I saw before turning the corner was him inside the restaurant, sitting alone at the booth, talking animatedly to the empty bread basket like it was still me. I'd been excited about Oliver from the start. He had that old-fashioned charm, the kind that made you feel listened to rather than tolerated. A mutual friend had introduced us, saying he was a proper gentleman. After a week of easy texts and a few phone calls, he suggested dinner and a walk on the beach. It sounded romantic, like something out of a film. I wore a sundress, simple but enough to feel special. When I met him at the seafood place near the shore, he was already waiting, smart shirt, warm smile, standing like he owned the space. Dinner went well. He told stories about his childhood, his old dog, funny things he'd done as a teenager. I laughed more than I had in ages. Afterwards, we strolled down to the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky pink and gold, the tide rolling in gentle waves. It felt idyllic. Shoes in hand, cool sand underfoot. I thought maybe I'd found someone worth trusting. The conversation drifted to family. He mentioned his parents, then casually said his dad used to hit his mum. He spoke of it the way someone might mention burnt toast, offhand, ordinary. My stomach nodded. "I'm sorry, did you say your dad hit your mum?" Oliver shrugged. "Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It never really hurt their relationship. Sometimes that's just how it is." I stopped walking. My heart thudded. The idea that a man could hit a woman and excuse it as normal, it turned my blood cold. "I don't agree with that," I said firmly. "No man should ever raise his hand to a woman." His expression changed in an instant. The smile vanished. His jaw tightened, eyes hardening into something I hadn't seen before. "Don't you dare insult my dad," he snapped. His voice was sharp, venomous. I tried to calm him, to explain, but he wasn't listening. He grabbed my arm so tightly I winced. Before I could react, his hand whipped across my face. The slap was sharp, ringing in my ears. My eyes watered. I stumbled back, stunned. He stepped closer, fist connecting with my shoulder, a blunt force that sent pain searing down my arm. Panic flooded me. I tried to push him away, but he was stronger. He hit me again. Sand sprayed beneath my feet as I struggled. My mind screamed, "Run." But my legs wouldn't obey. Shouts. Footsteps pounding the sand. A group of strangers appeared from nowhere, voices raised, pulling him off me. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing, clutching my throbbing face. "Are you all right?" a woman asked, crouching beside me, her hand warm on my shoulder. I couldn't answer. My body shook too violently. Oliver raged at the group, cursing, fighting to push past them. Someone shouted about calling the police. That's when he bolted, sprinting down the beach until he vanished into the dark. The strangers stayed with me. One gave me their jacket. Another rang the police. I sat on a bench, tears streaking through sand on my skin, the sting in my cheek a pulsing reminder of what had just happened. When officers arrived, they listened as I told them everything. How dinner had been fine, how his words on the beach had revealed something darker, how his hands had proved it. I gave them his name, his number, every detail I had. They never found him. He denied everything, spun a story about a harmless date. My word against his. And men like him always seem to know how to wriggle free. Her name was Zenobia, and she greeted me at the Portland Cafe like she was floating 3 inches off the ground. Flowing linen dress, bracelets that clinked softly when she moved, and an aura of smug calm that hit harder than the smell of matcha lattes and patchouli incense wafting through the air. At first, Zenobia seemed interesting. She had that free-spirited vibe, the kind that makes you think she's about to read your tarot or convince you to move to Bali. She asked what podcasts I listened to, what books I read. Then, the moment I mentioned therapy, her face twisted like I'd said I enjoyed drowning kittens. "Therapy's fake," she announced, loud enough that the barista flinched. "Depression is laziness. Anxiety is just attention-seeking. People don't need therapy, they need discipline." The air around the table froze. I tried to laugh it off, sip my chai, change the subject. She wasn't having it. "You know why society's crumbling? Because everyone thinks popping pills and crying to strangers fixes their problems. It's weakness. I only consume wisdom from Marcus Aurelius audiobooks. Stoicism, baby. That's all you need." She leaned forward, eyes glittering. "You don't take medication, do you?" I hesitated. "Mistake." Zenobia slammed her palm on the table, rattling the ceramic cups. "I knew it. You're one of the drugged sheep." People at the surrounding tables started staring. One guy whispered to his girlfriend, "Is this a cult meeting?" I tried to de-escalate. "Look, I don't think this is working out." That's when Zenobia snapped her fingers at the barista and shouted, "Don't serve him anything else. He's unstable." The poor barista just stood there, frozen, latte pitcher in hand. Zenobia stood up, flung her scarf dramatically over her shoulder, and declared, "This man is a danger to women. He admitted he takes mind control pills." My stomach dropped. She wasn't just being weird, she was weaponizing the entire cafe against me. I stood, muttered something about leaving, but she blocked the aisle like a prophetess guarding the temple gates. "No," she said firmly. "You need an intervention. Right now." And then she pulled out her phone. At first, I thought she was calling a friend. Nope. She dialed 911. "This is Zenobia, goddess of light," she announced into the receiver, voice carrying through the cafe. "I'm at Holy Bean Coffee, and there's a man here confessing to violent thoughts while under psychiatric drugs. He's unstable. Send someone immediately before he hurts us." I froze. Every eye in the cafe turned on me. My blood went cold. I sputtered, "That's not true. I didn't say any of that." But it didn't matter. Once you hear unstable man, psychiatric drugs, you don't forget it. 5 minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the Portland drizzle. A police cruiser screeched to a stop outside. 2 officers came in, hands resting on their belts. Zenobia shot her hand into the air like a teacher's pet. "It's him. He admitted he's dangerous." The cops turned to me. "Sir, can we talk outside?" Humiliation doesn't even begin to cover it. I stammered my explanation while a dozen strangers sipped lattes and watched me escorted out like a criminal. Zenobia followed, of course, whisper shouting to the cops that I was hiding violent tendencies under Big Pharma's control. To their credit, the officers were patient. They asked if I was okay, if I actually had said anything threatening. I explained it was just a first date gone nuclear, that I'd only mentioned seeing a therapist. One of the cops sighed, rubbed his forehead, and muttered, Yeah, we get this kind of call sometimes. Meanwhile, Zenobia was pacing like a preacher, waving her arms, insisting she could feel the darkness in my aura. Finally, the senior officer turned to her. Ma'am, unless you have real evidence of a crime, we can't hold him. Her jaw dropped. You're just going to let him walk. He admitted he's medicated. The officer's voice sharpened. Taking medication isn't a crime. Zenobia looked betrayed, like the entire justice system had failed her personal philosophy. She stomped her sandal against the wet pavement, shouted, "You'll all regret this when society collapses," and stormed off into the drizzle, scarf fluttering like a cape. The officers gave me a sympathetic look. Bad date? I nodded, too embarrassed to form words. Next time, one said dryly. Maybe stick to dinner and a movie. I laughed weakly, thanked them, and walked away with my heart pounding and my reputation probably in tatters at Holy Bean Coffee. The last thing I saw as I glanced back was Zenobia on the corner, yelling at a parking meter about the dangers of antidepressants. His name was Bartholomew, but he insisted everyone call him Bix. We were meeting at a chain steakhouse near Times Square, the kind with oversized menus, neon beer signs, and waiters who look like they've survived at least 3 Broadway auditions. I picked it because it felt safe, normal. But Bix wasn't normal. Not even close. He strutted into the restaurant with a battered leather satchel under one arm, kissed my cheek like we'd been married for 10 years, and whispered, "Tonight's special." I thought he meant me. I was wrong. The waiter led us to a booth, and before I could slide in, Bix dropped his satchel on the table, yanked it open, and pulled out a spiral-bound notebook labeled Operations Report in messy Sharpie. He flipped to a fresh page, licked the tip of his pen, and gave a slow, exaggerated scan of the dining room, like he was a detective casing a crime scene. I laughed nervously. "Big night of journaling?" He winked. "I'm here on assignment." The waiter returned with water. Bix held the glass up to the light, swirled it like wine, sniffed, then scribbled notes. He glanced at the waiter. "Too many ice cubes." 8. "Should be 6. Docking points." The waiter blinked, looked at me, then back at him. "Docking points. I'm a mystery diner," Bix said with dramatic weight. "Corporate sent me. Don't blow your cover by acting suspicious." The waiter opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it and walked off. I leaned forward, whispering, "You work here?" "Not anymore," Bix said, tapping his pen against the notebook. "But once a mystery diner, always a mystery diner. It's in my blood. The code doesn't die." The code. Like he'd taken some kind of food critic oath. Dinner spiraled from there. Every action came with a running commentary. The bread basket? Stale. 5-hour shelf life minimum. Write it up. The butter? Temperature variance. Unacceptable. Write it up. The booth cushion? Squeaks. Bad optics. Write it up. He scribbled furiously, pausing only to glare at the waitstaff with narrowed eyes, as though he were a CIA handler testing recruits. When the appetizers arrived, he whipped out his phone flashlight and inspected his onion rings like they were radioactive. "Uneven breading," he muttered, jotting down more notes. "Presentation, subpar. Service, borderline negligent." I sat there poking at my salad, watching other tables whisper and point. The staff had started huddling behind the bar, shooting daggers at our booth. One waitress muttered, "He's back again." Again. The idea that this wasn't the first time chilled me. Then the manager arrived. Middle-aged guy in a button-down, polite but strained smile. "Sir, is there a problem with your meal?" Bix leaned back in the booth, steepled his fingers like a mob boss, and said, "I'll be filing a full report with corporate. But if you want to save yourself a lot of trouble, I suggest comping tonight's meal." I nearly dropped my fork. "Wait, what?" The manager's smile twitched. "Comp your meal?" Bix nodded gravely, flipping his notebook closed with a snap. "That's protocol." I whispered, "Bix, we haven't even eaten yet." "Shuh," he hissed. "This is how the system works." The manager stared at him for a long, awkward beat, then muttered, "Excuse me," and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. But no. When our entrees came, his steak and my chicken, the poor waiter set them down with shaking hands. Bix pulled out a tiny ruler from his satchel. An actual ruler. He measured the steak's thickness, clicked his tongue, and wrote more notes. Then, without hesitation, he stood up, plate in hand, and marched toward the kitchen. I sat frozen while the entire restaurant watched him storm past the swinging doors, steak held high like he was delivering evidence to the Supreme Court. 5 minutes later, he returned triumphant. Told them medium rare means medium rare. Not medium. Not rare. Medium rare. He slammed the plate down, grinning like he'd saved the world. I wanted to crawl under the booth. By dessert, the staff had stopped hiding their loathing. Our waiter slapped the check down without a word. I reached for it, but Bix waved me off. Don't worry. This is covered. Mystery diner privileges. He tucked the bill into his notebook like it was already taken care of. Except it wasn't. The manager reappeared, arms crossed. Sir, you need to pay for your meal. Bix looked offended. That's not how this works. Sir, the manager said, voice tight. You do this again, and I'm calling the cops. The entire restaurant had gone quiet. I grabbed my purse, slapped cash on the table, and muttered an apology so fast it was practically a prayer. Then I bolted for the door. Bix tried to follow me, notebook clutched to his chest, calling after me. They'll thank me one day. I'm protecting standards. Out on the sidewalk, I sucked in the cool night air like I'd just escaped a hostage situation. Through the window, I could see Bix still inside, gesturing wildly at the manager, waving his notebook like scripture. And all I could think was, somewhere in that notebook, underlined 3 times, my name was probably listed as unsupportive companion, needs training. Her name was Calpurnia, and she showed up to our first date, carrying a leather portfolio, like she was heading to a corporate boardroom. We were meeting at this sleek little sushi bar in Soho, the kind of place with dim lighting, minimalist decor, and menu prices that made you think twice before ordering an extra roll. The bar glowed a neon blue, and soft lo-fi music hummed in the background. It should have been romantic. It should have felt like New York magic. Instead, it felt like I was about to be audited. Calpurnia didn't even sit down before sliding the portfolio onto the table with a heavy thunk. She tapped the cover with a manicured finger and smiled. So, let's make this productive. Productive. That was the first word out of her mouth on a date. The waiter approached with menus, but Calpurnia waved him away like she'd already solved that part of the evening. We'll do edamame to start. Then 2 dragon rolls. Oh, and a seaweed salad. Thank you. She didn't look at me once. When the waiter left, she opened the portfolio to reveal color-coded spreadsheets. Actual spreadsheets. She had charts. She had graphs. She had bullet points. I've already reviewed your LinkedIn, she announced matter-of-factly, scrolling through her tablet to cross-check with the papers. Your salary bracket is acceptable for the New York market, though your title is, let's call it, growth stage. But that's fine. I can work with growth. I blinked, chopsticks frozen in my hand. Thanks. She nodded briskly. Don't thank me yet. I need to assess your 5-year plan. It wasn't a joke. Calpurnia pulled a pen from behind her ear and started jotting notes on a page labeled Candidate Assessment. She leaned in, eyes sharp. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And don't give me that cliché answer about being happy. I want quantifiable goals. I stammered something about career advancement and travel. She scribbled notes, then glanced at her Apple Watch like she was timing me. Okay, fair. But what about marriage? Kids? Homeownership? Crypto investments? I tried to laugh it off. This feels like an interview. It is, she said simply, not even looking up. The waiter returned with edamame, and I swear I saw him smirk when he caught sight of the spreadsheets spread across the table like CIA dossiers. I popped a soybean into my mouth, mostly to avoid answering more questions. Calpurnia chewed thoughtfully on her salad. You scored well on the emotional intelligence segment of your profile, but your social media presence is weak. Only 6 Instagram posts in the last year. That's concerning. Shows a lack of brand building. Brand building. She was talking about my personal life like I was a startup company. I finally asked, do you do this with everyone you date? She sipped her sake, eyes narrowing like I'd asked a stupid question. Of course. Why would I waste time on unqualified applicants? Relationships are mergers. You don't walk into one blind. That's how people fail. The table next to us burst out laughing at some joke, and I felt a wave of surreal embarrassment. They were drinking and flirting. I was getting performance reviewed over sushi. By the time the dragon rolls arrived, she'd pulled out a literal checklist. She ticked off boxes: career stability, family values, health insurance. Then she looked up at me with a sharp smile. So far, you're scoring at a B+. Not ideal, but workable. Workable? I echoed, a piece of spicy tuna roll halfway to my mouth. Yes, she said crisply. With some adjustments. You'll need to work on your networking and definitely post more. but I see potential. She closed her portfolio with a snap, leaned back, and declared, "This was productive. Not fun. Not exciting. Not romantic. Productive." I muttered something about an early subway and bolted before dessert. As I walked out into the chilly night, I realized I'd just been treated less like a date and more like a candidate for the position of future husband, benefits negotiable. The last glimpse I had of Calpurnia was her, hunched over her portfolio, already scribbling notes for her next assessment. I knew something was off the moment Emily walked into the IHOP with a stroller. It was 9:30 at night, and the place smelled like syrup, coffee, and tired decisions. Families with kids had long since cleared out, replaced by college students and truckers scarfing down pancakes under buzzing fluorescent lights. I'd picked the spot because it was casual, neutral, easy. A safe zone for a first date. But Emily pushed in through the glass doors with a toddler clinging to her hip like a koala, and my brain just short-circuited. "Hope you don't mind," she said, not even pretending it was a question. "He comes everywhere with me. He's my little man." Little man? The kid was maybe 3 years old, wearing pajamas with dinosaurs on them, and holding a sippy cup like it was a Molotov cocktail. I tried to smile. "Oh, cool. He seems energetic." Energetic didn't even scratch it. By the time we sat down, the kid had pulled every sugar packet out of the holder and was building a sticky little mountain on the table. Emily didn't even flinch. She slid into the booth, smoothed her skirt, and said, "So tell me about yourself." Now look, I'm not against kids, but you don't show up on a first date with a human who still needs diaper wipes. It felt less like a date and more like a job interview for temporary stepdad. We ordered pancakes, and while I was halfway through describing my job, Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, and said, "Sorry, I have to take this. Business stuff." Then she stood up and walked out, leaving me with the kid. I blinked, looked at the kid, looked back toward the door. She was already gone. And then the chaos began. The toddler stared me down with those glassy, mischievous eyes kids get right before they unleash hell. He picked up his sippy cup, shook it like a grenade, and then, boom, juice everywhere. It sprayed across the booth, soaking my shirt, dripping into my lap. "Nice," I muttered, blotting myself with a napkin. It looked like I'd just lost control of my bladder in front of half the restaurant. The kid giggled maniacally, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Then he stood up on the booth seat, stuck his sticky little hands in my hair, and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Clean up! Clean up! Everybody everywhere!" Heads turned. Every single table in the IHOP looked at me like I was a deadbeat dad who couldn't control his demon spawn. A waitress walked by, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Cute kid." I tried to explain, "Not mine." But she was already gone, smirking. Meanwhile, the toddler grabbed a fork and started stabbing at the butter packets, sending little splats of yellow flying across the booth. One landed on my cheek like a war wound. Another hit the waitress's shoe as she passed. "Buddy, chill," I whispered, trying to wrestle the fork away. But he had the grip strength of a Navy SEAL. That's when things got, let's say, extra awkward. In the middle of this chaos, the juice-soaked front of my jeans was clinging in a way that made it look like I was very excited to be there. Not in the fun way. In the "this toddler just hosed me down" way. People kept side-eyeing me, and I could feel their judgment radiating across the sticky floor tiles. I leaned across the table, whispering like I was in some hostage negotiation. "Please, little dude, just eat your pancake. Just sit." He stared at me, then shoved half a pancake into his mouth and started drooling syrup all over the booth. By the time Emily strolled back in, a full 40 minutes later, I looked like I'd been through a food fight. Syrup on my shirt, juice on my pants, hair spiked with toddler fingers. The kid was gnawing on a butter knife like a medieval knight. Emily barely glanced at the scene. She just slid back into the booth, scrolled on her phone, and said, "So anyway, where were we?" I sat there in stunned silence, still dripping apple juice, feeling like I'd just been punked. And here's the kicker, she didn't apologize. Not once. She acted like leaving me alone with her kid on a first date was the most natural thing in the world. When the check came, she smiled sweetly and said, "You don't mind grabbing this, right? I mean, you already bonded with him." Bonded. That's what she called it. Like we'd shared some magical father-son moment instead of a public humiliation ritual. I tossed some cash on the table, muttered something about an early morning, and bolted for the door. As I left, I caught the kid waving at me with syrup-coated fingers. "Bye, Daddy," he shouted. The entire restaurant froze. I swear even the guy flipping pancakes in the back stuck his head out to watch me go. So yeah, if you ever wonder how a date can ruin your night, your dignity, and your dry clean only shirt all in under 2 hours, try babysitting a stranger's toddler in the middle of an IHOP. I went in looking for romance. I left feeling like I owed child support. His name was Thaddeus, and he had that hipster lumberjack look, thick beard, flannel shirt, trucker hat, the kind of guy who could either fix your sink or start a cult. We met on an app, and he insisted on picking me up for the date. Got a surprise for you, he texted. Something different. Different turned out to be a 2-hour drive out of Manhattan in his beat-up pickup truck that smelled like cedar chips and gasoline. By the time we hit the New Jersey backroads, my phone had 1 bar of service and my gut was screaming, bad idea. I asked, so where exactly are we going? Thaddeus just grinned, one hand on the wheel, the other drumming against a mason jar full of kombucha in the cup holder. Hidden gem, he said. Off the grid. You're gonna love it. We pulled up to what could generously be described as a cabin. More accurately, a shack in the woods. 1 flickering porch light, a sagging roof, and the faint sound of wind whistling through broken boards. The nearest sign of life was probably 3 counties away. He hopped out, clapped his hands, and said, "Welcome to paradise." Inside, the place smelled like mildew and old coffee. A single mug sat on the counter. A mattress on the floor. A dusty lantern flickered, throwing long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. My stomach twisted. "This isn't dinner," I said carefully. Thaddeus chuckled. "We don't need restaurants. That's all fake civilization. Out here, it's just us, nature, and truth." He said truth, like it was a person sitting in the corner with us. I glanced at the door, calculating my exit strategy. But before I could make an excuse, he pulled a log from a stack and tossed it into a rusty stove with a clang. "Sit. Relax. Take your shoes off. Stay a while." "Actually," I said, backing toward the door, "I think I should." That's when he blocked me, arms outstretched, grin widening. "You're safe here. Safer than in that broken city. Out there, men are weak. Women are corrupted. But here," he tapped his chest, "here it's real." Panic started gnawing at me. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. My hands shook as I typed out a text anyway, hoping it might go through. Cabin. Creepy guy. Send help. Thaddeus noticed. His smile dropped. "You don't trust me?" "Of course I do," I lied. "I just need the bathroom." While he pointed down the hall, I ducked outside instead, bolting into the cold night air. My boots sank into mud as I sprinted toward the road. Behind me, Thaddeus's voice bellowed. "Hey, where you going?" Branches snapped, footsteps pounded. I didn't look back. I just ran until I saw the faint glow of headlights. A miracle, a sheriff's cruiser crawling down the road. I ran straight into the beam, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car screeched to a stop, and the deputy jumped out, hand on his holster. "What the hell's going on?" Gasping for air, I pointed back toward the cabin. "He brought me out here. He wouldn't let me leave. He's chasing me." Thaddeus emerged from the trillion seconds later, red-faced and panting. "Officer, thank God you're here. She's unstable. She broke into my property and..." "Your property?" I shouted. "You kidnapped me." The deputy held up a hand. "All right, enough. Both of you against the car." Thaddeus smirked as if he'd won. "See? Women always lie when they're caught." But then the deputy's radio crackled. A dispatcher's voice cut through. "We got that text ping. Traced to your number, ma'am. Location matches." The deputy's eyes narrowed. He turned to Thaddeus. "Sir, do you have ID?" Thaddeus bristled. "Don't need one. Government's a scam. Step away from the lady." When he didn't, the deputy's hand went to his taser. Last warning. For a split second, I thought Thaddeus would lunge. His fists clenched, his beard bristled, and that wild gleam in his eyes said he might actually fight a cop in the middle of the woods. Then zap. The deputy fired. Thaddeus dropped like a felled tree, twitching in the mud. The deputy hauled him up, cuffed him, and shoved him in the back of the cruiser. "Jesus," he muttered, shaking his head. "You meet him online?" "Yeah," I whispered, still trembling. The deputy sighed. "These woods are full of guys like him. Think they're prophets. Think women are their salvation. You were lucky." As the cruiser pulled away with Thaddeus thrashing in the back seat, I stood under the buzzing porch light of that rotten cabin, realizing just how close I'd come to disappearing into the woods forever. Her name was Euphemia, though she insisted I call her Yuffie. We met at a cozy little cafe in Chicago's art district, one of those places with exposed brick, latte art, and baristas who looked like they were auditioning for indie films. When I walked in, she was already there, sipping tea with a Bible-sized book beside her. She looked normal enough, big smile, smart dress, kind of radiant in that I meditate twice a day way. For the first 20 minutes, it was fine. She asked about my job, my hobbies, even laughed at my stupid joke about Trader Joe's frozen meals. I thought, okay, chill, normal date. I can work with this. Then she leaned forward, her eyes glittering, and dropped it like a bomb. So, how soon do you think you'll be ready to convert? I blinked. Convert? Like to what? To the only right way, she said smoothly, tapping her enormous book. My future husband has to share my faith. My kids have to be raised in it. There's no compromise. I need to know if you're in. I choked on my cappuccino. We just met. Her smile widened. Exactly. That's why we need to clarify expectations. No point in wasting time on bullshit. She said bullshit with the confidence of a preacher swearing at a revival. The barista slid a muffin onto our table just then and muttered, "Order for Jesus?" The timing couldn't have been worse. Yuffie's eyes flicked to the ceiling, like she'd just been handed divine confirmation. "See? He's already here," she whispered, dead serious. I laughed nervously. Pretty sure that was just an order for some guy named Jesus. "Don't mock signs," she snapped, her tone flipping sharp. "That's dangerous. That's how Satan sneaks in." The tables nearby went quiet. I could feel people pretending not to listen, their ears stretching anyway. I tried to soften it. "Look, religion's cool and all, but I think we might be moving a little fast." That's when she pulled out pamphlets. Actual glossy pamphlets. She slid one across the table, like it was a contract. "Here, read this. These are the requirements. Modest dress, no porn, no swearing, no sex before marriage." My jaw dropped. "Wait, no swearing?" Her smile was razor sharp. "Words matter. But it's okay. I'll fix that bad habit." "Fix?" I sputtered. "Lady, you're acting like I'm a broken appliance." Yuffie nodded solemnly. "That's exactly what dating is. You take a man, you strip away the filth, and you build him back better." Something in me snapped. I'd been patient, polite, but this was too damn much. "Okay, hold up," I said louder than I meant to. "You show up to a first date, demand I ditch my entire identity, my hobbies, my freedom, and what? Thank you for the privilege of becoming your personal project? That's insane." Her smile froze. The whole cafe was watching now. "You don't get it," she said slowly. "This isn't optional. You're chosen. You're supposed to be mine. You don't feel it yet because you're still poisoned. But don't worry. I can wait." She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her fingers were cold. "By the second date, you'll feel it. By the third, you'll be begging me to lock you in." "Lock me in?" I yanked my hand back. "What the hell does that even mean?" She just smiled again, eerie and calm. "You'll see." At that point, I'd had it. I stood up, muttered something like, "Nope, I'm done, screw this," and started walking out. But Yuffie wasn't about to let me go quietly. She stood too, voice ringing through the cafe. "This man doesn't respect purity. He's enslaved by lust." People gasped. Someone actually clapped. I don't know if they thought it was performance art, but my face burned like I'd just been roasted alive. The barista finally called over. "Ma'am, you need to leave if you're gonna start yelling." Yuffie pointed at me like a witch at trial. "He's damned unless he converts." Damned. I bolted for the door, nearly tripping over a chair. Outside, the crisp Chicago air hit my face like a baptism. Behind me, I could hear her still ranting, voice muffled through the glass. The last glimpse I had before I turned the corner was Yuffie pressing her palms against the cafe window, smiling at me like a lover, mouthing the words, "You'll see." His name was Archibald, though he went by Archie. He was tall, soft-spoken, and the kind of guy you'd expect to see reading poetry on a subway. When we matched, he seemed sweet, bookish, thoughtful, maybe a little shy. We agreed to meet at a small Italian trattoria in New Jersey, all checkered tablecloths, and Frank Sinatra crooning from the speakers. I walked in, spotted Archie waving nervously from a corner booth, and felt a flicker of relief. He looked normal, harmless. Then I noticed the woman sitting at the booth directly behind him. Older, big hair, floral blouse, eyes sharp as knives. She was pretending to read a menu, but her gaze kept flicking between me and Archie like she was grading us. Who's that?" I whispered as I slid into the booth. Archie flushed pink. "Oh, that's my mom." "Don't worry, She's just here to read the energy. Read the energy? She won't interfere, he said quickly. She just likes to make sure I'm safe. The words hung in the air like bad garlic. The waiter dropped off water, and Mom leaned over the booth divider, her perfume smacking me in the face. She's got nice posture, Archie, she said in a thick Jersey accent. Strong hips. Good for children. I nearly spit my water. Archie giggled nervously and ducked his head. I tried to salvage it by talking about books, but every time I opened my mouth, his mom would lean closer, listening like a spy. She made little noises, approving hums, disapproving clucks, like a judge on a cooking show. Halfway through the breadbasket, she slid into our booth. Just sat down like she belonged there. I'll only be a minute, she said, ignoring my wide eyes. So, tell me, sweetheart, do you cook? Do you clean? Do you satisfy? I choked on my breadstick. Excuse me? She leaned in, smile coy, lipstick too red. Archie's last girlfriend was a dud. Pretty but no spark. I can tell you've got fire. Am I wrong? My whole body went cold. Archie tried to protest, but his mom hushed him with a pat. The entrees arrived, chicken parm for me, lasagna for Archie, a just-in-case pasta primavera for Mom. That's when things got truly surreal. I felt something brush against my knee under the table. At first, I thought it was Archie. Then the hand slid higher, fingertips grazing in a way that was absolutely not accidental. I froze. My fork hovered midair. Mom smiled sweetly at me over her pasta. Everything okay, darling? You look flushed. Archie was too busy cutting his lasagna to notice. Meanwhile, her hand crept further, nails grazing my thigh through my jeans. I shifted, pulled back, but she followed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. This wasn't just helicopter parenting. This was predatory. I stammered something about the restroom and practically launched myself out of the booth. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection, muttering, "What the actual hell is happening?" When I came back, Archie looked apologetic. Sorry if she's being intense. She just cares a lot. His mom winked at me. Winked. By dessert, I was done. I tried to excuse myself, but Mom leaned in close, her perfume suffocating. In a low voice, meant only for me, she murmured, "If he's too shy, you come to me. I'll show you what a real partner does." My stomach lurched. That was it. Game over. I stood, grabbed my coat, and threw down enough cash to cover my meal. I have to go. Archie blinked. But I thought things were going well. Before I could answer, his mom slid her hand across the table and placed it on his. Don't worry, Archie. I'll take care of her. The implication made my skin crawl. I practically sprinted out into the cool night air, heart hammering. Behind me, I could hear her laughing, a throaty, unsettling sound that didn't belong in a family restaurant. Out on the sidewalk, I took 3 deep breaths, trying to shake the smell of her perfume. A couple passing by gave me a weird look, probably because I looked like I'd just seen a ghost. And maybe I had, because when I glanced back through the Trattoria's window, Mom was still staring at me, lips curled in that same predatory smile, one hand stroking Archie's shoulder like she owned him. And maybe me too, if I wasn't careful. Her name, or at least the name she gave me on the app, was Persephone, which should have been my first clue she was trouble. Anyone who names themselves after the literal queen of the underworld is either a mythology nerd or a chaos gremlin. Spoiler, she was both. We matched on a Wednesday, and by Thursday night we were meeting up at a Five Guys in downtown Boston. Not glamorous, but her profile had given off this easygoing, I don't need candlelight, I just need fries energy. That, plus the fact she had the kind of photos that made you think, okay, this could actually be something. When I walked into the burger joint, greasy air hitting me like a wall, I scanned the room for the girl from the pictures, sleek hair, sharp eyeliner, cheekbones that could cut glass. Instead, I saw a woman waving at me from the back booth. And she looked nothing like her photos. Similar vibe, sure. Same eyes, maybe. But the face? Softer. The hair? Different. The build? Off. I froze mid-step, thinking maybe I'd walked into the wrong Five Guys. But she waved again, grinning like we'd been friends for years. Hey, over here. I sat down, trying not to look like I'd been catfished, but my brain was already screaming. That's not her. That's someone else. She leaned across the table, eyes sparkling. So funny story. Those pictures? Yeah, that's my sister. She takes way better selfies than me. I blinked. Wait, what? Don't worry, she said quickly. It's not like I lied. We're basically identical if you squint. People always mix us up. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The confidence with which she said it almost made me doubt myself. Almost. Anyway, she continued, flipping her hair, now that you're here, I'm glad I came clean. Honesty is sexy, right? Sexy. She said that word while dipping a fry into mayo and staring at me like she was auditioning for a low-budget music video. The line for food was buzzing behind us. The smell of sizzling beef filled the room. But all I could focus on was the fact that I'd been bait and switched, and Persephone didn't seem even a little bit sorry. So, she said, popping a fry into her mouth, are you gonna order me the Cajun fries or what? I stood up, still dazed, and got in line. Behind me, a couple of college kids whispered, probably sensing my walk of shame energy. When I came back with 2 bags of greasy food, she clapped her hands like a kid at Christmas. Perfect. Just like in the pics. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? You saw the pictures. I always order this. So now it's like consistent. She wasn't joking. She was treating her sister's food preferences as if they were hers, as if I was supposed to step into the script of some alternate reality where I was dating her sister by proxy. I bit into my burger, mostly to avoid saying anything, but she kept going. Don't act like you're not lucky. You got the real me tonight. The unfiltered version. Raw, authentic, unedited. Isn't that what everyone wants? Her tone had this edge of defiance, like if I disagreed, I was a shallow bastard. I muttered, I just didn't expect. She cut me off. Expectations are bullshit. You wanted a hot girl, right? Check. You wanted good conversation, right? Double check. You wanted someone who knows how to handle a burger? Baby, I'm triple checking all your boxes. That last line came out low, almost sultry, and it sent a weird shiver down my spine. Because suddenly, this wasn't just false advertising. It was a seduction attempt by someone who'd rewritten the rulebook entirely. And she wasn't subtle. Halfway through her burger, she licked ketchup off her thumb in a way that was a little too deliberate for 5 guys at 8 p.m. Then she leaned closer, her perfume clashing with the greasy fry smell, and whispered, Tell me honestly, doesn't it turn you on that I lied? That I fooled you? That I got you here, and you're still sitting? I nearly choked on a fry. Oh no, not really. Her eyes narrowed. Liar. The table next to us burst out laughing at something on their phones, and for a moment I wished I could swap lives with any of them. Because sitting across from Persephone was like being trapped in a weird, low-stakes porno where the plot made no sense, but the actress refused to break character. Then she dropped the kicker. So when do you want to meet my sister? I froze. I'm sorry, what? She smirked. Oh, she knows about this. We share everything. Clothes, makeup, men. Don't look so shocked. You'd love her. She's the upgraded version. My jaw hit the floor. Upgraded? She nodded, sipping her soda. Taller. Skinnier. Better hair. But don't worry, she's not as fun as me. I'm the freaky one. She's the classy one. Together, we're the perfect package. She said freaky, with a wink that made me want to crawl into the fryer and never come out. I stammered, I think I should go. She slammed her palm on the table, startling the guy behind us. Don't bullshit me. You're turned on right now. Every eye in the 5 guys turned to us. My face burned so hot it could have melted the ketchup pumps. I scrambled for my coat, muttering excuses, but Persephone just leaned back, smug. Run all you want, baby. You'll come crawling back. They always do. Curiosity's a horny little bitch. The words echoed in my skull as I bolted out the door, greasy air clinging to me like a curse. Outside, Boston traffic roared past, horns blaring, neon lights reflecting on the wet pavement. I sucked in a deep breath of cold air, trying to wash the fries and sex hybrid vibe out of my lungs. But as I glanced back through the window, Persephone was still there, licking salt off her fingers and watching me go with a grin that said, Game over? Nah. Round 2's coming. I didn't wait to find out. I walked fast, then ran faster, vowing never to trust a profile picture again. Because catfishing isn't just lying about who you are. Sometimes it's setting a trap so bizarre, so unhinged, that even when you escape, you're left wondering if you somehow lost. His name was Mortimer, though he told me to call him M.O. I probably should have bailed right then. We'd been chatting online for a week, and M.O. seemed harmless enough, funny in a dad joke kind of way, a little self-deprecating, maybe too many emojis. He suggested we meet at a diner in Cleveland, one of those classic greasy spoons with neon signs buzzing outside and laminated menus that smelled faintly of syrup and Windex. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked diners. Neutral ground. Neutral prices. Easy exit if things went south. When I walked in, Mo was already at a booth, hunched over a cup of coffee like it held all the secrets of the universe. He looked up, grinned, and waved me over. "Hey there, sunshine," he said, sliding out so I could sit. He was taller than I expected, balding in a way he tried to disguise with gel, and wearing a shirt that read "Grill Daddy." I smiled politely, slid into the booth, and told myself to give him a chance. The first 20 minutes were fine. We talked about our jobs, the weather, the absurdity of Ohio traffic. He cracked a few corny jokes that made me groan, but at least he seemed relaxed. I ordered pancakes, he ordered a Denver omelet, and we settled into that small talk rhythm you get on first dates. Then came the second coffee refill. The waitress topped up our mugs, and Mo leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was about to tell me state secrets. "So," he said, eyes gleaming. "Full transparency time. You ready?" I froze mid-sip. Sure." He beamed. "I owe about 90 grand. I nearly spit coffee all over the table." "Wait, 90,000? "Yeah," he said, almost proudly. "Student loans, credit cards, a little gambling debt, couple hospital bills. But hey, love conquers all, right?" He laughed, too loudly, too long, while I blinked, wondering if I'd misheard. But no, he was dead serious. Before I could respond, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a wad of napkins and a pen. "So here's the plan. I've been working on a repayment schedule. Just rough numbers, nothing binding." And right there, between the salt shaker and the syrup bottle, he started sketching out a financial blueprint like he was pitching a startup. "Okay, so I make about $42,000 a year before taxes. With minimum payments, I'll be debt-free by 2043. He scribbled furiously. "But if you and I team up, maybe co-sign a small loan to consolidate, we can knock that down to, say, 2030. Imagine that, a fresh start together." I stared at the napkins, covered in messy numbers, percentages, and the occasional doodle of a dollar sign. "Mo," I said carefully, "we just met." "Exactly," he said, eyes shining. "And I don't want to waste time. You deserve the truth up front. No secrets. No bullshit." The pancakes arrived, steaming, golden, dripping with butter. They smelled heavenly, but my appetite had evaporated. Mo stabbed at his omelet with a fork, talking between bites. "I learned from my ex, you gotta lay it all out early. She didn't appreciate my honesty, but that's her loss. Not every woman wants a man with a plan." I managed a nervous laugh. "Most women don't want a man with 90 grand in debt." He chuckled, wagging his fork at me. "Ah, but that's where you're wrong. Debt builds character. It's humbling. Sexy even. I mean, look at me, I'm practically a financial bad boy." A financial bad boy. I wanted to crawl under the table. The waitress walked by, gave me a sympathetic glance, and muttered, "Need anything, hon?" I almost begged her to call 911. Mo leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Debt isn't just numbers. It's intimacy. It's like foreplay." I nearly choked on a bite of pancake. "Excuse me?" "Think about it," he said, eyes wide. "Letting someone into your finances is more intimate than sex. Anyone can get naked. Not everyone can share their credit score." I wanted to scream. Instead, I pushed my plate away, folded my hands, and said, "Mo, I don't think this is going to work out." His face fell. For a moment, I thought he might actually cry. But then he rallied, slapping the table so hard the syrup bottle rattled. "Don't say that. We're meant to be. You're the first woman I've told the full number to on the first date. That means something." "It means you overshare," I muttered. "No," he insisted. "It means trust. It means partnership. It means us." I slid out of the booth, fumbling for my coat. "It means I'm leaving." He scrambled after me, napkins fluttering from his hands. "Wait. At least let me explain the interest rates." The entire diner was staring now. Truckers, college kids, an old couple in the corner. I bolted for the door, but Mo followed me into the parking lot, still waving his scribbled repayment plans. "Don't you see? Love is debt. Debt is love. You're my co-signer of destiny." My Uber pulled up at that exact moment, a blessed miracle. I dove into the back seat, slamming the door as Mo pounded on the window with a greasy palm. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Bad date." "The worst," I said, breathless. Mo's voice echoed through the glass. "Call me baby. We'll consolidate together." As we pulled away, I looked back one last time. He was standing in the rain under the neon diner sign, napkins plastered to his chest, screaming about APR like a prophet no one asked for. And that's when I realized Some people overshare about their pets, their parents, their politics. But Mo thought debt was a love language, and that was 90,000 reasons too many to ever see him again. Her name was Serafina, though she insisted everyone called her Sarah. It sounded elegant, ethereal, like something out of a novel. But nothing about the night that followed was elegant. It was messy, raw, and terrifyingly real. We met on an app, one of those where profiles are half carefully curated selfies and half cryptic likes, tacos, adventures, and sarcasm bios. She'd messaged first, which already felt like winning the lottery. Her profile picture was striking: cocktail dress, dark hair cascading over one shoulder, lips painted crimson. The kind of picture that makes you think she was born under neon lights. We agreed to meet at a dim Vegas steakhouse, tucked into the corner of a hotel that smelled faintly of chlorine and cigarette smoke. The kind of place with red leather booths, mirrored walls, and low jazz playing like the soundtrack to a gangster film. I got there early, nervous. Sarah arrived 10 minutes late, teetering on glittery heels, her cocktail dress slightly askew, her makeup smudged like she'd been crying or running, or both. She dropped into the booth across from me, exhaled hard, and said, "Just so you know, I was supposed to get married this morning." I blinked. "Come again?" "Married," she repeated, snatching a piece of bread from the basket and ripping it apart like it had personally betrayed her. "White dress, veil, chapel on the strip. You know the works." But I ran. She laughed then, high and sharp, like the punchline of a joke only she understood. I sat there, stunned. "Wait, you're serious?" She pulled a veil from her purse, a crumpled, satin thing stuffed between her wallet and a lipstick tube. She slapped it onto the table like evidence in a trial. Dead serious. Straight from the altar to here. The waiter arrived, asked if we wanted wine. She waved him off, demanding whiskey instead. "Neat," she said. "No ice. No bullshit." I ordered a beer, because suddenly whiskey felt way out of my league. Sarah downed half her glass in one gulp, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and grinned at me. "So, you don't mind being my rebound, right?" My throat went dry. "I guess it depends what rebound means." "Means I need distraction," she said bluntly. "Means I need someone who doesn't look like him. Means I need to forget the way his mom kept glaring at me like I was a con artist." She sipped again, slower this time, and her eyes softened. God, you should have seen her. Classic monster-in-law. Hated me from day one. Said I wasn't wife material. Like, sorry I don't crochet doilies and wear pastel sweaters. I'm not a step-forward bitch. The waiter reappeared, pen poised. We ordered, ribeye for me, filet mignon for her. When he left, she leaned closer, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You know why I left? It wasn't cold feet. It was survival instinct. I looked at him standing there in his tux, sweating like a pig, smiling like he'd just won a prize. And I thought, if I say I do, that's it. I'm trapped. Forever. His house. His family. His rules. And I realized I'd rather set myself on fire than be anyone's possession. Her words tumbled out fast, feverish, raw. I could see people in nearby booths glance over, curious. Part of me wanted to run, grab my coat, mutter an excuse, vanish. But another part of me was fascinated. How often do you sit across from someone who literally just fled a wedding? So you left him at the altar? I asked softly. She laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Yep. Walked out mid-vows. The priest was halfway through holy matrimony when I bolted. Guests gasped, phones came out, probably went viral already. Can't wait to see the TikToks. She drained the rest of her whiskey and signaled for another. When the food arrived, she attacked her steak like it was the groom himself. Between bites, she started telling me about him. Harland, the almost husband. Accountant. Wore beige socks. Proposed with a ring his mom picked out. He wasn't a bad guy, she admitted, chewing thoughtfully. That's the worst part. He wasn't cruel or abusive or anything dramatic. He was just ordinary, boring, safe. And I thought I wanted that, until I was staring at his beige socks at the altar and realized I was about to suffocate. She leaned across the table, her breath warm with whiskey. You're not beige, are you? My brain stuttered. I don't think so. She smirked, brushing her foot against mine under the table. Good. I don't do beige anymore. Her flirting was sudden, intense, almost desperate. 1 minute she was ranting about family politics. The next she was making innuendos loud enough for the waiter to overhear. It was equal parts thrilling and deeply uncomfortable. At one point, She pulled the veil back out of her purse and draped it over my head, giggling. "Look at you. Adorable. My runaway groom." I yanked it off, face burning. "Sarah, people are staring." "Let them," she said, eyes glinting. "Half this city's fake anyway. At least I'm honest." The night spiraled from there. After dinner, she insisted we go to the casino next door. She grabbed my hand, dragged me through the flashing lights and clattering slot machines, shouting, "Tonight we gamble with fate." She threw chips on the roulette table like confetti, laughing manically whether she won or lost. At one point, she climbed onto a stool and yelled, "I was supposed to be married today. Who wants to buy the bride a drink?" The crowd cheered. Bartenders lined up shots. She downed them like water. By midnight, she was swaying, mascara streaked, veil tied around her neck like a scarf. She pulled me close, whispered, "You're my escape hatch. Don't let me go." Her grip was tight, almost painful. That's when things tipped from chaotic fun into genuine fear. A man appeared at the edge of the crowd. Tall, furious, tux jacket undone. Harland, the almost groom. His face was pale, eyes wild. "Sarah," he shouted over the music. "What the hell are you doing?" The room went silent. Sarah froze, then laughed too loud. "Oh look, Beige Socks found me." He stormed over, grabbed her wrist. "You humiliated me. In front of everyone. And now you're here? Making a scene?" She yanked her hand free. "I told you I don't do cages." They started arguing, voices rising, people filming on their phones. I stood there awkwardly, caught between them, not sure if I should intervene or vanish. Security eventually stepped in, separating them. Harland kept shouting about betrayal, about wasted money, about family disgrace. Sarah just blew him a kiss and screamed, "Better luck next bride." They dragged him out, still raging. The adrenaline left her trembling. She collapsed into a chair, head in her hands. "God, what am I doing with my life?" she whispered. I sat beside her, unsure what to say. She looked up, mascara smeared, eyes bloodshot. "You think I'm insane, don't you?" I hesitated. "I think you're intense." She laughed weakly. "That's polite for crazy." For a moment, the mask dropped. She wasn't the wild runaway anymore. She was just a woman, terrified of making the wrong choice, of waking up in a beige house with beige socks and beige dreams. She took my hand gently this time. "Promise me something?" "What?" "Promise you'll never settle for beige." I nodded. "I promise." She smiled sadly, leaned in, and kissed me on the cheek. Not romantic, not seductive, just desperate. Then she stood, adjusted her veil scarf, and whispered, "Thanks for being my rebound. You're free now." And just like that, she vanished into the Vegas night. When I first saw her profile, I thought it was a joke. Her bio read, "Looking for someone to save me." I laughed, thumb hovering over the screen. I figured it was just a playful exaggeration, a cheesy hook to stand out. Everyone writes weird lines like that. I'd seen "steal my fries and my heart," or "looking for my Netflix password sharer." So I thought she was being funny. I swiped right. Her name was Melissa. Not the most unusual name, but the way she carried herself online felt different. Her pictures weren't overproduced selfies or glam shots. They were simple. Her in an oversized sweater, messy hair tied up, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a mug of coffee. One of her leaning on a railing at night, blurred city lights behind her. There was something unpolished about it. Real. We matched. She didn't message me first, I messaged her. Something lame like, "So what exactly am I supposed to save you from? Bad pizza delivery? Boring dates?" She replied with just one emoji, the winking face. Playful. Teasing. I thought I'd nailed it. We traded messages for a week. I tried to keep things light. Favorite movies, worst jobs, dumb icebreakers. She was responsive, sometimes funny, but I couldn't shake the feeling she was holding something back. When I asked if she wanted to meet, she agreed quickly. No hesitation. Just said, "Randy's Donuts. Saturday. Noon." I grinned at the choice. Randy's wasn't fancy. It was a landmark, sure, that giant rooftop donut watching the traffic in Inglewood, but not exactly candlelight and wine romantic. Still, it was public, easy, and cheap. Fine by me. I got there 10 minutes early. The air smelled like sugar and fried dough, sweet and heavy. People milled in and out, some grabbing coffee on the run, others sitting in plastic booths under fluorescent lights. She was already there. Melissa sat in the far corner, hoodie pulled tight around her face, styrofoam cup clutched in both hands. She looked smaller than her photos, more fragile. When she looked up and saw me, Her eyes darted like she wasn't sure if I was real or not. I walked over, forcing a smile. Melissa? She nodded quickly. Andrew? Yeah. Hey. Good to finally meet you. I slid into the seat across from her. She gave a faint smile, then looked down at her cup. So, I said, trying to ease the tension. Randy's Donuts. Solid choice. I mean, who doesn't love a coffee and a glazed? She didn't laugh. I tried again. I thought you were kidding on your profile. The whole save me thing. I figured it was, a joke. Her eyes lifted to mine then, and I swear I felt the weight of them hit me like a punch. I wasn't kidding, she said softly. The air seemed to shift. What do you mean? I asked, my voice lower now. She glanced around the shop, scanning every face like she was checking for ghosts. Then she leaned closer, whispering so quietly I had to bend forward to hear her. I need help. I can't do this alone. My stomach twisted. Help with what? Her sleeve slid back as she reached for her cup. That's when I saw the bruises. Dark, yellowing smudges climbing up her forearm. My throat closed. Melissa. It's my boyfriend, she said quickly, words tumbling out. He's not just mean, Andrew. He's dangerous. He hurts me. The way she said it, flat and trembling all at once, made my skin prickle. I opened my mouth, but she kept going. Last week he slammed me against the counter because dinner was too salty. He left these. She touched the bruises gently, wincing. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. And that's not the worst. Her lips trembled. She looked away as if ashamed. Then she whispered, He forces me. When he's drunk. When he's angry. When he just feels like it. He doesn't care if I cry, if I beg. Sometimes he laughs while I'm begging him to stop. He tells me I should be grateful anyone wants me at all. That no one else would ever touch me. The coffee in my hand went cold. My stomach lurched, while rising. I wanted to smash my fist into something. Into him. She swallowed hard, voice dropping even lower. Last night, he put a pillow over my head. He said he wanted to see how long I'd last. He only stopped when I clawed at him. I thought I was going to die. My hands shook around the cup. People around us were laughing, scrolling their phones, eating donuts like nothing was wrong. And here she was, whispering horrors into the air like confessions. I didn't put that bio to be funny, she said. I put it because I'm desperate. Because I need out. I need someone to believe me. I stared at her. My chest felt like it was caving in. I believe you, I said firmly. Her eyes met mine, wet and red. Then help me. Please. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a cop. I was just a guy who came for donuts. But in that moment, I knew leaving her alone wasn't an option. We go to the police, I said. Together. Tonight. She froze, like she was waiting for me to take it back. When I didn't, her lip quivered and she nodded. Okay, but if he finds out, her voice trailed off. I didn't need her to finish. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cold and sterile. Melissa clutched my arm like a lifeline as we walked in. The desk officer looked up. Melissa whispered, I need to report abuse. They took us into a small room. She told them everything. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Years of fear spilled out. The bruises, the threats, the assaults, the pillow over her face. She showed them the photos she'd hidden, the threatening texts he'd sent, the bruises modeled across her ribs. The officer listened, jaw tight, taking notes. We're going to help you, he said. For the first time, I saw her shoulders sag with the faintest relief. The next week was a blur. The police set her up in a safe house. They gave her a burner phone, new locks, instructions not to go anywhere alone. They told her they were setting up surveillance. They were going to catch him in the act. I visited her at the safe house whenever I could. Brought coffee, donuts, anything to make her smile. Sometimes she cried into my chest. Sometimes she stared blankly at the wall. But slowly, I saw flickers of life return. Then came the night. Police vans outside her apartment. Unmarked cars on the block. Officers wired her with a tiny mic. She was terrified, trembling, but determined. I can't do this, she whispered, clutching my hand. Yes, you can, I said. And you're not alone. Not anymore. She nodded, tears streaming, then walked inside. I waited with the officers, my stomach in knots, listening through their headset. The door slammed. Heavy footsteps. His voice, loud and slurred. Where the hell have you been? Melissa's voice shook. Just out. He cursed, something crashed. Then his tone turned darker, sharper. Don't lie to me. We all heard the thud as he grabbed her. Her muffled cry. His threats. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to run in, to tear him off her. But the cops held me back. Then his voice, "I'll shut you up for good." That was enough. "Move, move, move," the sergeant barked. They swarmed the apartment. Doors splintered, lights blazed. Shouts, chaos. Seconds later, they dragged him out, red-faced, spitting curses, cuffed tight. He kicked, screamed, called her names that made my blood boil. Melissa collapsed into my arms, sobbing, shaking like her body was finally letting go of years of fear. At the station afterward, she sat under the harsh lights, sipping a styrofoam cup of coffee. She looked exhausted, broken, but alive. "You saved me," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you saved yourself. I just walked with you." She smiled weakly, eyes glistening. "That's all I needed. Someone to walk with me." I don't know what happened to her long term. Court cases, therapy, rebuilding, it's a marathon. But I'll never forget that night. And every time I drive past Randy's Donuts, that giant rooftop circle glowing over the freeway, I think of Melissa. Sitting in that corner booth, hoodie tight, whispering those words, "Save me." I think about how close she came to being silenced forever. And how many others are still out there right now, clutching their coffee, waiting for someone to believe them. Mexico is never quiet. Not really. Even in the middle of the night, the city breathes and rattles like some enormous body that refuses to sleep. Car horns bark, radios mutter through thin walls, someone laughs too loudly in the alley below. At first, I thought the noise would smother me. But after 3 years here, I've realized I need it. The sound of this place is proof I'm not alone, even when I feel loneliest. That loneliness was exactly why I downloaded Tinder. I'd told myself I was above it, that I'd meet someone in the plaza, or at a language exchange, or while waiting in line for tacos. But the truth was simpler and sadder. I wanted someone in my bed. Someone to whisper with when the heat made sleep impossible. Someone whose hand would brush mine not just by accident, but because they wanted it there. And then came Vicky. Her profile wasn't curated like the others. No fake poses, no cropped X's, no bathroom selfies. Just 3 simple photos, all slightly underlit, all authentic. In one, she was eating a squites with messy hair and a mischievous smile. The caption read, "Soy maestra de primaria, mi rio facil." I'm a primary school teacher. I laugh easily. Her eyes were green, and I swear they looked like they were deciding whether to tease you or forgive you. We matched instantly. My opening line was a joke about her corn cup. Her reply was a jab about my Spanish. Within a few minutes, she suggested we meet at a cafe she liked, a small tiled corner shop with glass windows and fresh conscious every morning. The day of the date, I found myself grooming like a teenager. I shaved twice, ironed my shirt, even dabbed cologne behind my ears. I kept telling myself this wasn't a big deal, just coffee, just conversation. But my reflection looked like a man preparing for confession. When I arrived, she was already there, wearing a yellow-orange dress that hugged her curves in a way I couldn't ignore. She waved, a smile blooming across her face. My chest tightened, like I'd been sucker-punched by sunlight. "Two Eries?" she teased as I approached. I nodded, trying not to grin like an idiot. We hugged, kissed each other's cheeks, and her perfume brushed across my skin like a secret I wasn't supposed to know. The first hour felt like stolen time. We split a conchus, fingers brushing when we tore the pastry in half, sugar dust clinging to her lips in a way that made me want to lean across the table and lick it away. She told me about her students, how one boy had tried to sneak a cricket into class by hiding it in his shoe. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee, and she leaned in with a napkin, dabbing at the mess dangerously close to my thigh. Her laughter floated through the cafe like a melody. My nerves gave way to something else. Heat, anticipation, the thrill of knowing this wasn't just friendly banter. There was a current running under our words, the kind you can feel in your stomach before it ever shows on your face. When she suggested a walk, my pulse jumped. "Conozco un señor que hace elotes que te van a cambiar la vida," she said. "I know a guy who makes corn that'll change your life." The sun outside was brutal, pressing itself against the city like a hand on skin. The sidewalks shimmered, and I could already feel sweat pooling at the base of my neck. Vicky walked beside me, our arms brushing now and then, small touches that carried more charge than they should have. Once her fingers grazed mine, deliberate, and stayed just a beat too long. I let them. We passed through streets humming with life, vendors shouting, buses groaning, kids chasing a soccer ball between parked cars. But the world seemed to shrink to her and me. At one point, she leaned close, pointing out a mural of Frida Kahlo. Her breath touched my ear, warm and intimate, and goosebumps ran down my arms. That's when I heard it, the bark. It came from the alley just ahead. Short, sharp, guttural. I glanced over, but saw nothing but shadows, a dumpster, and a refrigerator tipped on its side. Vicky laughed nervously, as if the sound didn't matter. We kept walking. Her alert man appeared like an angel of corn, his cart gleaming with ears steaming under a cloth, cheese crumbles, mayonnaise, and cut limes. He smiled like we were the only customers who mattered. He dressed the corn heavily, and Vicky handed me one, daring me to bite. The heat, the salt, the chili, it all hit at once, messy and perfect. That's when the second bark came. Louder, longer, and then it moved. From behind the dumpster, a dog emerged. Thin, ribs showing, patches of fur missing. Its eyes were wild, its lips peeled back to reveal teeth yellowed with hunger and hate. I froze. So did she. The dog growled, low and deliberate, a sound that vibrated in my bones. I raised my hands instinctively, palms out. "Quieto," I said, voice calm but shaking. Vicky took one step back. The dog took two forward. The tension snapped like a rubber band. It lunged. I shoved myself in front of her without thinking. Its teeth sank into my shin, pain erupting like fire. I kicked, stumbling, heart thundering. Vicky gasped, dropping her corn, hands fluttering uselessly in panic. The dog turned its attention to her. She was frozen, dress clinging to her in the heat, calf exposed like an invitation. It lunged again, snapping at her bare leg. "No!" I shouted, yanking her behind me, but the dog was too fast. Its teeth grazed her calf, tearing skin, leaving blood that dripped in thin, red rivulets down to her ankle. She screamed, a sound raw enough to strip the air. The world narrowed. My vision tunneled. All I could hear was her breathing, ragged and panicked, and the dog's snarling hot breath. And then, out of nowhere, the alert vendor appeared. A spray bottle in his hand, aimed like a weapon. He shouted, "Fuera," and blasted the dog in the face. The dog yelped, startled, and bolted down the alley. Gone. Just like that. Silence crashed in. Vicky collapsed onto the pavement, clutching her leg, blood staining the hem of her dress. I knelt beside her, shaking, brushing her hair from her face. Her skin was slick with sweat, her breathing shallow. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I begged. She looked at me, eyes wide, lips trembling. She whispered, "Don't let go." The vendor shoved a towel into my hand, urgent. "Hospital," he barked. I wrapped the towel around her calf, the fabric soaking through almost immediately. Her skin was warm under my fingers, sticky with blood. She bit her lip to stifle a moan, her whole body trembling as if she were caught between pain and shock. I could feel her nails digging into my arm, hard enough to hurt. My phone slipped in my sweaty hand as I tried to call for a ride. Too long. Too slow. A taxi passed. I waved, desperate. The driver hesitated at the sight of blood. I promised triple the fare. He finally let us in. In the back seat, Vicky leaned against me, clutching my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. She smelled like sweat and perfume and coppery blood, all mixed into something both intimate and horrifying. Her thigh pressed against mine, trembling. I whispered, I'm here," over and over like it could protect her. The hospital was chaos, fluorescent lights, antiseptic, strangers crying. Nurses rushed us into a room. The towel came off, and the wound gaped, ugly and red. She whimpered, covering her face with her arm. The doctor worked quickly, cleaning, stitching, explaining in clipped Spanish. Not too deep, but dangerous without treatment. Vaccines. Antibiotics. I nodded dumbly, watching her squeeze her eyes shut against the needle. I held her hand the whole time. She squeezed back with such intensity it felt like she was trying to climb inside me, to anchor herself through pain. Her nails scratched crescents into my skin, and I welcomed it. Anything to remind me she was still here. When it was over, she sagged against me, pale and trembling. Her voice was a whisper, "Gracias. No me dejes." Hours later, we stumbled out into the night. The city was quieter now, shadows stretching long. We sat on a bench outside, sipping bottled water. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and churros. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her bandaged leg stretched in front of her. "You saved me," she murmured. I didn't answer. My leg still throbbed from my own bite, but the only thing I felt was the heat of her against me. When I walked her home, she invited me upstairs to help rewrap the bandage. Her apartment was small but warm, books stacked on every surface, the faint smell of vanilla in the air. She sat at the kitchen table, dress hiked up to her thigh so I could reach her calf. I peeled away the gauze slowly, careful not to hurt her. She winced, sucking in a sharp breath, and my hands shook as I cleaned the wound again. Her skin was soft under my fingers, even where it was torn. The closeness was almost unbearable, her scent, her vulnerability, her trust. "Better," I whispered when I finished. She smiled faintly. "Better." We sat there in silence for a long moment, just staring at each other. Her eyes were glossy, tired, but still playful. I wanted to lean forward, to close the distance. But instead, I poured us both a glass of cold hibiscus tea from her fridge. She clinked her glass against mine, whispering, "A tu salud. To your health." We laughed softly, but beneath it all, a chill lingered. The reminder that just hours ago, teeth and hunger and chaos had almost stolen her from me. That the line between intimacy and horror is thinner than anyone wants to admit. That night, as I finally walked home under the quiet hum of the city, my leg aching, I realized this. I had gone looking for companionship. What I'd found was something darker, stranger, and maybe stronger, a bond forged in blood and fear, in heat and closeness. And once you've shared that with someone, you don't forget it. Ever. Sometimes I wonder if Tinder is just a playground for loneliness, dressed up as a marketplace for love. They tell you it's about connection, about chance encounters made possible by algorithms. But I've started to realize it's just as much about hunger, people hungry for touch, for validation, for escape, and predators hungry for prey. Last night, I matched with someone named Jason. At first glance, he was exactly the kind of man my restless brain wanted me to want. Tall, lean, that smirk people wear when they know they're attractive but don't care to admit it. His profile pictures were casual. Him at the beach, him hiking, him laughing with friends. Not glossy, not staged. Almost too perfect in their imperfection. Our conversation began with the usual shallow chatter. Music, food, where we'd traveled. He teased me about liking sweet wines. I teased him about quoting The Office unironically. It felt safe, familiar, like two people circling each other in a dance. But underneath the banter, I felt that little hum. Attraction, sure, but also caution. Because I'd heard stories. I'd read things at 2 a.m. I'd gone down rabbit holes about what lurks beneath dating apps. And once you've read enough, you can't unsee it. The first article I ever stumbled across was about women being lured to private parties by men they'd matched with, only to find themselves trapped, drugged, locked in, handed over to people who saw them not as human, but as currency. At first, I dismissed it as rare, urban legend level stuff. But then I saw the statistics. The National Trafficking Hotline reported that since 2007, dating apps had been used to exploit victims. Thousands of cases, many of them young women, 14 to 24, coerced into situations they never imagined. Ordinary conversations had turned into cages. That thought haunted me as Jason's messages lit up my phone. He wanted to meet for drinks. A casual suggestion, nothing sinister about the words themselves. But my chest tightened as if danger had already brushed past me. Was I paranoid? Probably. But paranoia is just vigilance dressed in bad lighting. I kept chatting anyway, because there's another part of me, one that craves the spark, the flirtation, the possibility that this might actually be real. That maybe he wasn't a wolf. That maybe he was just a man who wanted to touch my hand across a table, to lean close and whisper something only meant for me. And that's where the NSFW undercurrent comes in, doesn't it? Because desire doesn't vanish just because fear joins the room. If anything, the tension doubles. I imagined Jason's hand on the small of my back as we walked out of a bar, the way his voice might lower when he leaned in, the dangerous intimacy of a stranger who suddenly feels like he knows you. But what if that hand pushed me into a car? What if that voice whispered not sweet nothings, but instructions? I think about this too much. A few months ago, I went further than articles. I started digging into forums, dark corners of the internet where survivors whispered warnings and researchers tried to map out the danger. I read testimony after testimony of women who'd been targeted online. One girl recounted how she matched with a man who seemed ordinary, funny, charming, attentive. He invited her to meet in a public place, but insisted on picking her up first. Easier, he'd said. She never came home. When she escaped months later, she was broken in ways I don't want to write down here. I can't get her words out of my head. They don't look like monsters. They look like boyfriends. That's the detail that keeps me up at night. Predators don't look like predators. They look like Jason. And here's the part that really twisted my gut. Some of them were caught. Arrested. In one nearby city, police uncovered a man who had been using Tinder to lure women to dates, only to drive them to remote locations. He hadn't yet killed anyone, but the fear he left behind was permanent. When I read that article, I clicked through his photos. They could have been Jason's. Smiling on a beach, arms around friends, a face you'd trust if you didn't know better. So when Jason's message popped up on my screen, "Drinks tomorrow?" my heart slammed against my ribs. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to smash my phone against the wall. I stalled, telling him I'd think about it. He sent a winking emoji. It felt playful, but I couldn't shake the unease. I decided to test him. I looked up his name, his Instagram. At first, everything checked out, normal photos, normal captions. But then I noticed comments on older posts, left by girls who seemed young. Too young. The comments were strange. "Hope to see you again," followed by hearts. Profiles that hadn't been active since. Profiles that seemed to vanish into thin air. That's when the paranoia hit full tilt. My mind spun. Were these coincidences or breadcrumbs? Had Jason been weaving a web across platforms, a trap disguised as charm? I stayed up until 3 a.m., scrolling, reading survivor interviews on YouTube. One woman said traffickers hang out on apps not just to lure, but to study. To watch how people talk, what they want, what vulnerabilities shine through their words. "They make you feel chosen," she said. "They make you feel like the only one. And then they take everything." I lay in bed, phone pressed to my chest, trembling. That's when another message came in. "Jason again. Still up? Wish I could see you." Part of me melted at the thought. The other part screamed. I thought about what it would be like to meet him tomorrow. To sit in a dim bar, candlelight flickering across his jawline. To sip wine while his knee brushed mine under the table. To feel the thrill of being wanted. But then I thought about following him to his car. About the click of a lock. About the way silence would swallow me if I screamed. I couldn't do it. At 4 a.m., I unmatched him. Blocked his number. My hands shook as I pressed the buttons. Relief and regret twisted together in my stomach, a sick cocktail. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun shadows around the room. My body still buzzed with adrenaline, but my mind kept replaying his messages. "Wish I could see you." What if he had been real? What if I just cut off the possibility of something beautiful? That's the cruelty of this digital age. Love and danger use the same language now. The same emojis. The same late-night invitations. If you'd told me my first real date in months would end on the cold tile floor of a restaurant bathroom, unable to move my own body, I would have laughed at you. But that's exactly what happened. I met Wesley through a mutual friend at a small get-together. I noticed him almost immediately, not because he was loud or commanding, but because he was the opposite. He had this calm, shy air, the kind of guy who doesn't force himself into the center of the conversation, but somehow still draws your eye. That night, he wore a navy sweater that made his hazel eyes look impossibly warm. I caught him smiling at my jokes across the room, and I thought, why not? So I approached him. He seemed surprised I wanted to talk to him, which only made him more attractive. We fell into conversation about music, classic rock, cheesy 80s ballads, and he admitted he still sang boy band songs in the shower. I laughed so hard I cried, imagining him belting out Backstreet Boys while shampoo dripped into his eyes. By the end of the night, he asked for my number. I hadn't expected it, but I gave it, and for the next couple of weeks, we texted constantly. Light, teasing, flirty. Enough to build anticipation. Enough to make me nervous. So when he suggested dinner, I said yes. The place we chose was cozy, low lighting, candles on every table. The kind of restaurant that wants you to believe romance can be cooked into the pasta. As soon as we sat down, my stomach started doing flips, not just from nerves, but from the way he looked at me. There's something unsettling about eye contact that doesn't waver. He listened like I was the only person in the world, his gaze locked onto mine, nodding gently as I talked. It was flattering, intoxicating, a little too much. The wine loosened us both. I teased him about his boy band obsession. He teased me about my terrible cooking skills. At one point, I reached across to steal a bite of his meal, and his fingers brushed mine deliberately, lingering for just a second too long. The touch was soft, warm, electric. For the first time in a long while, I felt chosen, seen, desired. But halfway through the main course, something shifted. A flutter in my chest. At first I thought it was just nerves. Who hasn't had a mini anxiety attack on a first date? I tried to laugh it off, sipping wine to cover the sudden tightness in my throat. The flutter didn't go away. It spread, heavy and strange. I excused myself to the restroom, telling myself I just needed a minute. In the mirror, my reflection looked normal enough, but I didn't feel normal. My face was pale, my lips dry. I splashed water on my cheeks, took a few deep breaths, whispered, "Pull yourself together." When I returned to the table, Wesley smiled so warmly I almost convinced myself I was fine. He leaned closer, brushing his knee against mine under the table. I wanted to lean in too, to let the evening slide into flirtation and promises. But then the world began to blur. The lights dimmed too far. The sound of his voice became muffled, like he was speaking from underwater. I blinked, trying to clear it, but the dark curtain kept drawing tighter around me. I remember trying to say his name, to tell him something was wrong. The words never left my lips. The next thing I knew, I was on the bathroom floor. Cold tile against my cheek, body unresponsive, panic raging inside me while nothing on the outside moved. My eyelids fluttered, but that was it. I could see him blurry leaning over me. His mouth moved, frantic. His hands on my shoulders, then at his phone, then back on me. "Please someone call an ambulance," I heard faintly, his voice breaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him I was still here. But my mouth wouldn't open. My body had become a prison. Time disappeared. There was only darkness, fear, and the sound of my pulse slamming in my ears. When I woke again, it was to the sterile brightness of a hospital room. Antiseptic stung my nose, voices murmured around me. A nurse leaned over, urging me to stay still. Her words were simple but devastating. "You had a stroke." I was 20-something. How could that happen to me? Shock froze me. My mind spiraled. Stroke meant wheelchairs, brain damage, lives ending halfway through. I tried to move, and my body resisted. Terror surged so hard I nearly choked. But then Wesley appeared at my bedside, his face pale, eyes wide but steady. He reached for my hand, held it carefully, as though it were glass. "You scared me," he whispered. Embarrassment mingled with fear. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be a date. Candles. Flirting. Maybe a kiss goodnight. Not this. Not hospital gowns and 4 drips. "I'm sorry," I croaked, my voice raspy. "Don't be," he said. "I don't care about the date. I care about you." Tears stung my eyes. The doctors explained it was minor, a small clot, likely stress-related. They'd caught it quickly. I'd need observation, medication, follow-up. But they expected me to recover fully. Relief warred with humiliation. Would Wesley bolt now that he knew I came with medical baggage? He didn't. He stayed. Through the long night of monitors beeping and nurses shuffling, he sat in the chair beside me, holding my hand, whispering reassurances. He brushed my hair back from my forehead when sweat made it stick. He told me stupid jokes to distract me from the 4. He even hummed softly when I drifted in and out of sleep. In those hours, the flirtation from the restaurant transformed into something rawer. More intimate than sex, in a way. He had seen me at my weakest, my ugliest, and he didn't run. He stayed. The next morning, as sunlight spilled across the hospital sheets, I realized I wasn't just terrified. I was grateful. That was the night Wesley stopped being just a date. That was the night he became my anchor. It's been 3 years since then. He's my husband now. Sometimes we joke about it. How our first date ended with me collapsing in dramatic fashion. How he earned boyfriend points before we'd even kissed. But underneath the humor, there's a truth I can't laugh away. He didn't just stay. He chose me fully, even with the mess, even with the scars. And that choice has meant more than any candlelit dinner ever could.